Hello and welcome to Cultural Calendar. I'm your host, Tony Della Flora. New Mexico over the years has earned a reputation as a mecca for the arts, a center for cutting-edge science, and home to some of the most awe-inspiring wilderness in the world. So it's more than fitting that Albuquerque will host the 18th International Symposium on Electric Art. The symposium will run September 19th through the 24th, and it brings together more than 100 artists and 400 presenters from around the world to explore ways that technology can be used to sustain the natural world. At least that's one of the themes. Today we'll discuss this monster event with three of the principals behind it. Suzanne Sbarge, who many of you probably know from 516 Arts and is also executive producer of ISEA 2012, as we like to call it here. Andrea Polli, artistic director of ISEA 2012. And associate professor of art and ecology at UNM, and Andrew Connors, curator of art at the Albuquerque Museum. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Andrea, let's start by explaining to viewers exactly what the symposium is.
Well, the International Symposium for Electronic Art is a symposium that consists of an international exhibition and conference that happens in a different place around the world every year. So last year it was in Istanbul, next year it's going to be in Sydney, and of course this year in Albuquerque.
Great. And so it was actually your idea originally to bring this event to Albuquerque. You've been to, 10 of these around the world before?
I've been to them for almost as long as I can remember.
Right.
Started 1994, I think, in Chicago, and I've been to ones in Germany and Singapore, and as a participating artist and as a speaker. So I've always been really interested in the idea of bringing one here, and there hadn't been one in the United States since 2006 when it was in San Jose, so
Right.
It was time.
Yeah. What's so intriguing about it for you? What keeps you going to all these every year and then taking all the time to actually bring one here?
It's an incredible community of people doing amazing things all over the world. So there's that sort of, friends that I've found in the field, but it's also one of the premier art, science, and technology symposia in the world, and it brings a lot of kind of fresh new ideas. So there's a lot of young and emerging artists, scientists, and technologists that are represented at the conference.
Right. I'm going to get into that a little bit more, but how big a deal was it to land this conference here? This is a pretty prestigious event.
It took a lot of effort, and it took showing that we could do it, and partnering with Suzanne was a big part of that, because the Land Arts Festival that happened here was kind of almost at the scale of an ISEA, and we had to prove that we could handle something like that. So to partner with Suzanne and 516 Arts and then the Albuquerque Museum was something that really made our bid for the symposium more attractive to the International Committee.
Okay. Now, I want to get in. We're going to get into a little bit more about the themes of the symposium. But what was your inspiration originally for trying to bring one here?
Well, there's been a lot of interest in the art, science, and technology world in addressing the problems of environment, global warming, climate change, and sustainability over the past maybe 10 years. And we're really starting to move in that direction in a very serious way in the global art, science, and technology field. So I think when you look at Albuquerque and the American Southwest and the arid environment that we live in, the water issues that we're dealing with, the ecosystem issues that we're dealing with, we're kind of a microcosm of what's happening in the rest of the world. So this was a really appropriate theme and an appropriate place to do it. The theme itself, let me just say, machine wilderness, came from a cultural geographer writing in the 1960s about the American Southwest and writing about the transformation of the Southwest due to the automobile. Mm-hmm. And now we're seeing a time when maybe the automobile as we know it is going to be moving into be something else. And so that's one of the topics that we're addressing.
Okay. Suzanne, when I spoke to you before, we were talking about the term electronic art, and it probably means a lot more different things than it did when this conference, when this symposium started. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, the term electronic art is actually more limited than the scope of this project. ISEA International keeps the term because it's part of their name, but this project really focuses on the intersection of art, science, and technology and the collaborations that happen among artists and scientists. So it's broader than what people might think of.
So we were thinking, you had mentioned, I mean, mobile media, robotics, that type of thing that's considered electronic art at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Biotech, not necessarily electronic in terms of wires and that kind of thing, but actually what they call wetware.
Okay, all right. I hope we have a picture of that somewhere. Suzanne, when Andrea just talked about the broad theme, machine wilderness. What does that mean to you? What were you, when you were out looking for people to participate in this? What were you telling them, sort of guiding them along to think about in terms of machine wilderness?
Well, I've really focused on how this project helps us envision the future and really looking at creative and innovative ways for survival on planet Earth. So
okay.
it's a grand concept, but it's just very inspiring to see how the creativity that artists work with and that scientists work with can come together and sort of become a new breed of innovation.
Okay. Andrew, you said when you heard the theme for this, you were really inspired by this. What does machine wilderness mean to you?
Well, building on what Andrea said, I love the idea that people can see these not as oppositional forces, but as forces that are moving in the same direction. And a number of these artists have created inventions that really sort of replicate or celebrate the natural world and the natural environment. And I find that very intriguing because often we think about robots as something that are sort of scary, that we need to be afraid of. And yet a lot of these artists are humanizing their inventions or making them act like animals or act like natural forces. And that to me is very inspiring. The best of artists have always been great inventors. And this exhibition really celebrates that sense of invention, that sense of creativity that's not making things that are off-putting. A lot of these themes sound like they could be very scary, but so many of them really are deep down human explorations of the way that we think about things and the way that we see the world around us.
Well, let's talk a little bit about there's 5 sub-themes that go under machine wilderness. Andrea, if you want to take a first crack at it. I know there's, I'll just run them down real quick. Power, creative economies, transportation, wildlife, and the cosmos. So.
Sure. Well, we invited experts from around the world to develop these sub-themes. So these are real interests of a number of different people. So gridlock, the power sub-theme, deals with kind of issues that we're having with our energy systems, and that's Erin Elder, Nina Elder, and Nancy Zazudel. Creative Economies, Econotopia's theme is Stephanie Rothenberg, who's a professor up at University of Buffalo and an exhibiting artist, and she's sort of addressing the issues with economy that we're dealing with, this massive economic crash that we've had all over the world, and how artists are actually rethinking currency systems. There's a new currency, online currency called Bitcoin, and one of the creators of that will be a featured speaker. Let me see, we have Dynamobilities is a theme specifically about transportation and mobility. So it combines kind of vehicles and mobile media, cell phone, smartphone kind of pieces.
Okay.
Radical Cosmologies is a theme developed by a curator who's living currently in Rio, and another curator in LA, and they're dealing with issues about space and space travel and its interaction with the world. And what am I? Oh, wildlife.
Wildlife.
So that's Transspecies Habitats, and that's one of my colleagues, Catherine Harris, in the Art and Ecology program, and many just incredible projects dealing with bees, with bats, with wolves,
yeah.
all kinds of projects that talk about how we can sustainably coexist with other species.
Okay. I want to veer off a little bit here. This is a massive, massive undertaking. Tell me about all the venues that are involved in this, and tell me a little bit about the time frame of this
Okay.
too. While we're
Well,
talking
it
about
all kicks off with the International Conference, September 19th through 24th in Albuquerque. There are pre-conference and post-conference activities as well. And for the conference venues, it's really, the home base is the Albuquerque Museum, and then there are different days of the conference in different places. 3 days in Old Town, 1 day at the National Hispanic Cultural Center, and 2 days in downtown. And then there's a day of special programming in Santa Fe after that, and then 1 day in Taos after that. So, and then the exhibition itself is also multi-site. So it's based at the Albuquerque Museum and 516 Arts, but there are 5 other satellite venues in Old Town and downtown where additional pieces are placed. And then the whole season of the fall is full of public programs all over the region, mostly in New Mexico, but some in Texas and Arizona as well. So it's packed. There's some, even after the conference, there's a lot to do throughout the fall.
Right. And for those viewers who are becoming completely overwhelmed at this point about the scope of this, you can go to www.ISEA2012.org to get all the information on this thing, all the venues, prices, artists, everything is on there. So we will mention that again before the end of the show, but that's the place to go. Andrew, as curator of art at the Albuquerque Museum, you were asked to take on a pretty big task, playing a pretty major role in this whole event. You're going to be, the museum will be home to more than 24 installations, and they're not just going to be here for the conference itself in September. It's
right. One of the things that we talked about right at the very beginning was making the ISEA programming more accessible to a general public and trying to welcome people into this, what could be a somewhat off-putting topic and title. And so at 516 Arts and the Albuquerque Museum, we decided to create basically a full exhibition-length exhibition and allow the public to come in and be introduced to some of these topics. So with the 5 other satellite locations here in Albuquerque, we're basically going to be presenting a multi-site museum exhibition. And as Suzanne mentioned, incorporate programming throughout the fall so that the general public can meet some of these artists, can talk about some of these issues, and can spend time and hopefully come back over time to these exhibitions to really begin to understand what it is that the artists are trying to tell us and to make their own connections to these very complex, mostly electronically produced or electronically run installations. But there are also just some really beautiful sculptures. There's some beautiful objects that are going to be here that hopefully will inspire people to think about the aesthetics of ideas as well.
One thing that's really wonderful about the show is there's a lot of artwork that's interactive, that responds to human touch, voice, heat. So it's sort of an experience to see the show.
Well, you had mentioned to me one of your favorite installations, exhibits, whatever pieces is a herd of benches, heliotropic herd of benches. Explain that, what that means.
Well, one of the artists that submitted through the review process is a professor in California, and he created a group of benches that have solar panels on the seats of them, and they're very small, individual size benches. But they have sensors, and the benches sense where the brightest light is in a space, and they move in that direction. And once they reach bright enough light, preferably direct sunlight, they'll sit in one spot and absorb the solar energy to charge their batteries. And once the batteries are charged, then they'll head off through a space. So we're going to let this group of 5 benches loose in the museum lobby, and we never know where the benches are going to wind up. And probably first thing in the morning, they'll all be clustered by the door because we have glass doors. So literally the art will be preventing people from entering the museum to see more art, which is kind of wonderfully ironic. But they do have their own sensors, and so one might sense brighter light in one direction and you'll wind up with a stray sort of wandering off from the flock. But I love the idea that these things that could be mechanical, mechanistic, scary, have been basically reduced to innocent little animals that are just sort of wandering through space.
Yeah, it's so much like us, just going to sit in the sun.
Yeah. One of the pieces at 516 Arts is called Domestic Plant, and it's basically a robotic plant that responds to light as well. So that one's actually tethered. It's on a leash, so it won't wander too far, but that's one of the moving pieces in the show as well.
Yeah. I think we're getting the idea this is not going to be any kind of traditional show or exhibition or anything. I had talked to you. You had mentioned a couple of your favorites, but we're going to show on the screen here in a minute the cover of the program, which features something called Escape. Describe that. What is that all about?
That's created by two artists from the UK who have created birds out of discarded cell phones. So they've used sort of the annoying sounds of cell phones to do something really creative and fun that can interact with one another and the viewer as well.
Okay. And you'd mentioned a couple other favorites, one called Gambio Cycle and one called Eye Dazzler. Briefly tell us about what those are.
Gambio Cycle is a piece created by 3 Brazilian artists who will be here for a little residency before the project building a new Gambio Cycle. And basically it's it's sort of a hybrid bicycle that includes a lot of electronics and interactive media, and it works with public graffiti and public space in Brazil, and they're bringing that here. And some of the kids from Working Classroom are going to be helping build the new Gambio Cycle, so we'll have that at 516 Arts. And then Eye Dazzler is created by a Navajo artist, Will Wilson, and a team of collaborators who are weaving a Navajo blanket out of thousands of tiny beads into a Navajo pattern, but they've incorporated QR codes into the weaving so that viewers can go directly to the website and learn more about their project right from the actual piece.
Very cool. Andrea, you told me you were looking forward to the world premiere of the Lowrider Symphony. Tell me about that.
Symphony 505, Chris Marinetti and Mary Margaret Moore are working with local lowrider car clubs to create a choreographed symphony of 8 lowrider cars that will move and actually have an externally controlled a system for controlling the boom sound of the cars. So I believe that audience members might even be able to make their own composition with these cars while they're in the big lot on 4th and...
It's 6th and Central.
6th and Central.
When is that going to be?
That's Sunday at 6:30 p.m. on September 23rd.
Okay.
And that's during the downtown block party, where there are a lot of outdoor free events like that. So that's just one of the performances, but it'll be full of...
I'm going to mark that one down for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So. And again, if you want to find out more about the events, it's ISEA2012.org, and you can go there and find everything you want to know about that. On the theme of performance stuff, there are some notable folks coming in for this. Laurie Anderson, for one, David Moss. Tell us a little bit about what they're going to be doing here.
Laurie Anderson will be performing her new piece called Dirt Day, and she's a real icon and a legendary figure in the world of electronic music. She will be presented by AMP Concerts, and she'll perform at the Chemo Theater that's open to the public. And she'll also be giving a keynote talk with one of the scholars from the Radical Cosmologies theme, Tom Leeser. She was one of the first artists to do an artist in residency with NASA, so she's been working with art science for a long time now. And then David Moss, he's someone who is from Albuquerque originally, but he's lived in Berlin for a very long time, and the Outpost Performance Space is bringing him to perform in the planetarium under the stars, as well as give a workshop. And he's a real innovator in voice and storytelling and electronics. So he's very avant-garde, intensely creative and inventive, and that'll be a really special performance as well. And that's also open to the public.
Great. Now, we have obviously a lot of people coming from around the world, different, would you say 30 different countries and all over the United States and stuff. But you've really made a concerted effort to have to New Mexico and Albuquerque artists specifically to reach out to them to get them involved in this. Why was that important to you?
Well, bringing the local artists together with the international artists, I think, is incredibly valuable for the local artists as well, to be part of an international group and international dialogue. And we do a lot of things that focus exclusively on locals, but I think that mix of local, national, and international is just very healthy for the artists and for Albuquerque's cultural environment.
Yeah. Andrew, you had mentioned something about that too, that it's it's a great opportunity for it to be put on an international stage.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we've got people coming from around the world that will be able to see some of the best creative minds that are operating here in New Mexico. And it also will hopefully encourage those artists to participate in the symposium and participate in all of these incredible activities to sort of recharge their batteries and get them excited about the opportunities that are out there internationally. I don't know how many artists from New Mexico really have participated in ISEA before, but we hope that this will be the beginning of lots more international collaboration for locals.
I think it's important to say that the work of the local New Mexico artists is at least of the caliber of any of the work coming out internationally, especially in this area of art, science, technology, and nature, because that's really an issue that artists have been dealing with here for a long time and have been pioneers in. So I think there's a real opportunity for us to showcase many of the amazing artists that are here.
Yeah, it's hard to count up the locals because many of them are part of collectives. The Meow Wolf Collective is something like 25 artists, and they're changing all the time. New people are joining in the process. It's collaborative work. And then the Corpus Electric Collective grew out of ISEA 2012. It was one of our educational projects, and that's a tech fashion project. So they'll be performing the tech fashion work, and they'll also have one of the dresses, garments, electronic garments in the exhibition as well. But that was about 15 artists, including some youth artists, high school and college students as well.
Right, yeah, there's a whole range of, it's not just established artists, it's young kids. And
there was a lot of apprenticeships going on.
Right, cool. Who are some of the other local people or organizations that people might know of from New Mexico? I think you mentioned Agnes Chavez.
Agnes Chavez is an incredible artist from Taos who's worked with us in many different capacities. She's also directed the STEM Arts Education Program for ISEA 2012, but her piece is called X Trees, and it's basically a Twitter-generated tree projection that the audience can participate in. So every Twitter message that's sent into the system creates a branch on the tree, and it grows up around the viewer. So that'll be at the Albuquerque Museum.
I'm glad we're finally finding something useful for Twitter. That's really good.
I want to mention Catherine Harris's piece. She's a artist here and professor at UNM. It's called Eden Again, and it's actually a bidet, and as she has said, it's going to be a palatial glass toilet at the Alvarado Urban Farm that feeds and fertilizes a kind of a wetland garden. So, and they're hoping that piece will even stay beyond the symposium.
Oh, cool. Very cool. You had all mentioned to me when I talked to you before that, you really were going out of your way to make this a little bit different experience from previous ISEAs, and maybe expanded is the right word, but you wanted a really different experience, and so you've added sort of some components to this that aren't normally part of this. Suzanne, you'd mentioned to me the educational component. Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, well, we worked very closely with Intel, who's been the lead sponsor on the STEM Arts Education Program, and that stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, taught through the arts. So there's different terms for it now. STEAM is another term that's being used, but basically it brings together educational approaches from both the sciences and the arts in very innovative ways, and it's really taking off now in schools, and teachers really want to learn more about the resources for how to teach this way. So we developed a series of programs that includes visiting artists and events and talks and artworks that will be featured during the conference, but it also includes the whole Intel Education Day of the conference on that Sunday, September 23rd. But a lot of the activities are geared towards teachers to help them learn about how to teach STEM arts in the classroom and give them lots of ideas. There's a lot of workshops as well for students, mostly middle and high school students.
Great.
And do we still have teacher scholarships available?
We do. We'd really
Okay.
like to encourage 6th to 12th grade teachers to sign up.
Okay.
We have scholarships available, and they just have to register, and they can join that full day of programs. And it's a mix of activities for teachers as well as the general public, and it culminates in that downtown block party. So there's sort of something for everybody, and it's fun for all ages.
Okay, great. Andrea, you'd also mentioned you'd try to bring in residency programs as part of this.
Yeah, usually the symposium has not involved residencies, but when it was in Singapore, they did have a few artist residencies. So artists came earlier than the symposium and worked. But in our case, thanks to partnering with many community organizations that Suzanne organized, we are sponsoring about 20 artist
Yeah,
residencies.
I think there's 22. Andrea and I went around the state sort of recruiting and telling people about ISEA and inviting organizations to sponsor artists to come. So as part of our international call for artists, we included over 20 of these opportunities that our partnering organizations developed. And they range anywhere from offering, you know, a piece of land and a tent and some volunteers to a $10,000 residency to work with a high-tech scientist. So it's a whole wide range of opportunities, and they've all culminated in something for the conference.
Great, great. We have just a few more minutes left. I want to get to a couple more quick questions here. Andrew, you had alluded to this before, but you know, some people might see this and just be intimidated by the art or the concept of it or whatever. And again, you all have made an effort to really make this an event accessible to everyone. Why? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think that's what we all want to do ultimately. While there's a great deal of specialization and we want to make sure that the specialists are able to cross-fertilize with their ideas, we also want to make sure that the general audience feels that they can have some say, they can have some participation in the development of new ideas. And the way to do that is to shake them up a little bit and to have people see things that they haven't seen before. I mean, that's when the art really becomes interesting. Art in any medium, when it's a new way of seeing things. And it's a new way of seeing things, but it's not necessarily a difficult way of seeing things. You just need to sort of change your language. You need to sort of change your perspective. And there are some incredibly sophisticated works of art that we're going to be showing during the run of the exhibition. But that doesn't mean that they're inaccessible. It just means that you've got to slow down a little bit and give the artist time to teach you about
In some
what they're
cases,
doing.
the artists are using familiar tools from people's lives, like cell phones, and taking them on a journey to do something else that they hadn't imagined. There's cell phone walks and interactive projects that artists have basically used cell phones as their medium.
And one of those is that an artist encourages people to basically record their memories, and they can upload their memories through an app and make that a part of the work of art, so that when you upload this app, you'll walk around anywhere in the world and it will give you a ping when you're close to somebody's memory, close to the spot that somebody identified as their memory location. So we hope that people throughout the conference will be recording their memories, and so that people will get pinged when they move around Albuquerque and hear recordings of people's memories.
Yeah, you know, we all live with this technology every day, and hopefully people will come to this exhibition and start to really think about that technology and kind of question how the role that it plays in our lives.
Briefly, I want to mention before we close here, you can find out information about all this, about getting tickets, about registering for the entire conference, however you want to do this, at ISEA, ISEA2012.org. And you can also register by calling 266-3451. It's 266-3451. And again, as you explained, you can register for the whole event. You can go to individual events. You can do it for a day. Any combination of things that you want, you can usually pay for most of the stuff at the door. If you want, obviously register ahead of time. So you've pretty much got every possibility covered here, I think. We're going to close up in a minute, but Andrea, I wanted to ask you, what would you like in an ideal world for people to take away from this symposium?
I'd like people to take away the idea that it's possible to imagine new realities and new options that we don't have to be. We're facing a lot of problems, we're facing a lot of issues with our environment, but we don't have to be afraid to think about new ways that we might approach solving those issues and those problems.
Either way, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just think that the focus on the future is a really amazing part of this conference, that it really helps people to envision the future and see how many of these ideas that may seem futuristic are really already happening right now.
All right. Andrew?
And I just hope that visitors will come to the 3.5 months of the exhibition and be inspired to see things in a new way and to think creatively.
Okay. Suzanne, one more time, the dates for the main part of the...
Okay, the conference in Albuquerque is September 19th through 24th. The Santa Fe Day is September 25th, and the Taos Day is September 27th. The exhibition is September 20th through January 6th, and then there are programs throughout the fall season around the state.
Okay. And Andrew, again, the exhibitions at the museum are up there for a lot longer.
Yes, exactly. The exhibition at 516 Arts and the Albuquerque Museum extends from September 20th through January 6th. So there are lots of opportunities to participate.
And there are also parts of the exhibition at the Natural History Museum, the Balloon Museum, the Richard Levy Gallery, the Alvarado Urban Farm, and
the Art and Architecture
UNM.
Building.
yeah, UNM Art and Architecture Building.
Okay, so pretty much you're not going to be able to go anywhere in Albuquerque without experiencing this somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, it sounds like an amazing program. I hope people locally don't pass up the opportunity to check this out, because this really is probably a once-in-a-lifetime thing. It's never going to come back, probably in our lifetime anyway, to Albuquerque, I would imagine. So this is really the time to get it. And this is, again, bigger than the balloon fiesta, as far as I can tell, in terms of all the moving parts and everything. And hopefully there'll be no squabbles with vendors while this is going on. So, yeah. Anyway, I want to thank my guests, Suzanne Sbarge, Andrea Polli, and Andrew Connors, for joining me today and to talk about ISEA 2012. And I want to thank you for tuning in to Cultural Calendar. I'm your host, Tony Della Flora, and we'll see you next time.